Okay, we're going to be learning the Mammar of it's on page 9 in the PDF. Tachas Eshaloi Avadita. We learned this Mammar before. So the pasuk says this is the middle of the klal. It's the middle of the curses. The Torah says like this: why are all these things going to happen? What's the reason for all the curses that are going to happen? So it says Tachas Eshaloi Avadita Hashem besimcha. Because you didn't serve God in joy when roiv koil, when you had plenty. So when you had plenty, you could have served Hashem with joy and happiness, and you didn't. So therefore, so to say, the curses have come. Just trying to see a second here. YouTube is working. So the pasuk says this: This is the level of the righteous. That the righteous people are the ones that reach the level of simcha. Like it says, simchu tzadikim b'Hashem, that the righteous are happy. So why is this something that's expected from everyone? It says simchu tzadikim. How could we expect every person to be able to reach the level of happiness, so much to the extent that the Torah is saying that the reason why there's all these things are happening is because a person's lacking happiness and joy in their life. So he says, there's two types of ways of service to Hashem. It's called midas yom and midas laila. The midah, the attribute of day and the attribute of night, means things that are clear, that are visual, things that are more concealed, like the idea of night when it's dark. There's the level of Yaakov, b'chinas Yisrael, and the level of Yisrael. And b'derech prat, and specifically, it's the difference, the levels of Torah and the level of Tefillah. So there's day and night. There's the name of Yaakov, the Jewish people, as they're represented by the name of Yaakov. We know Yaakov is the name of Galus, the name of the weak, the name of Chol. Yisrael is the holier name. So, and then we have the way we serve Hashem through davening and through learning. So it is like this. Rabbis have taught us, Zman Torah Lechud, Zman Tefillah Lechud. There's a specific time a person should be learning Torah, and a specific time a person is learning is davening. Davening is considered the chayisha, which is temporary. But Torah is forever. Its effect is everlasting. So first, to understand to understand what is this idea of tefillah. So we're trying to understand the idea of reach the understanding of why is it or how is it that a person can reach simcha in any situation. Even a person who's not considered what we'd call simchut tzadikim b'Hashem, even a person who's not considered the righteous, even that person can reach simcha. So the Havani Natfila Dechsiv, it says, V'yashkem Avram Baboker. Avram wakes up in the morning. The Hainu, meaning to say, Sha'avram is the teres shebelev kol echad ve'echad Yisrael, the hidden love that's within every Yid, he behelim behester b'chin l'sheina, that is considered concealed and like it's sleeping, and therefore it says Avram, who represents the beginning of Tefillah, especially in the morning, it says V'yashkem Avram Babok. He has to wake up, because before waking up, before a person enters the idea of davening, the person, he or she is sleeping. And a person has to wake up from their slumber, as it says, Im ta'iru b'reish echad, if a person were to wake up, and it says it with one reish, in the word ta'iru. And there's another verse that says Im ta'iru, which is two reishes, beis reish and pirish. What's the difference if you say waking up with one reish, or two is Im ta'iru b'reish echad haynu chitzaynis alev? It means the external part of your heart has already woken up. To be conscious, a person should be davening now. And when we have it with two reishes, it symbolizes that you're able to open up the inner part of your heart to davening. Then what are you opening up? The love into all you desire is God. There's a time when this yearning and desire of the love that's hidden, the Hainu b'shachris, in the morning. And because we know that Avram, of the three fathers, Avram is the attribute of chesed, kindness, which is love. And Avram wakes up in the morning. He wakes up the love. He wakes up the love towards Hashem, which is in the morning. That's why it says, V'yashkem Avram b'boker. Avram wakes up in the morning. V'inin hashena shel avazuhu. What does it mean that there's a slumber for this love? A person is sleeping. What does happen when a person is sleeping? That their logic, their thought process goes away from the brain. And your thinking and your logic is not together. So the brain is not dictating what you're thinking. I mean to say, it doesn't have to make sense. So sometimes we learned in Shabbos Parshas Vayeshev, where it says Ayinu Kachom, like we say Shir Malas Ayinu Kachom, and we were like dreamers. There's a plus to that. When a person is dreaming and a person's in slumber, so the person is able to, it's not dictated by the contradictions. Hello, everyone. We're middle. We're on page 9 on the left-hand side. So we're learning about the why. How is it that a person could have simcha? How could it be that anyone could reach simcha? Because the pasuk says simcha tzadikim b'Hashem, the righteous are happy. But at the same time, we find that part of the reason why there is a punishment, or so to say, the klalis, is because a person didn't implement happiness in their simcha, in their avodas. So how? But if it's only for tzaddikim, so we obviously have to say there's different levels of simcha. So
what paragraph?
We're going to start right now on the left-hand side, the second to last paragraph that starts v'inin hashein shalava, the idea of sleeping, of the idea of the love being asleep. So he starts off to explain there's a difference between day and night, there's a difference between Torah and mitzvahs, of Torah and tefillah, and the difference between Yaakov and Yisrael. Okay, so now we're going to try to understand what is the idea of the slumber when it comes to love. He says, because it says V'yashkem Avram b'boker, Avram has to wake up in the morning. He says, a person who's sleeping. That the person's machshava goes up, the thinking goes up, above the brain, means above the logic. So your mind is wandering, and again, like we said before, it's not always a bad thing. Like we say in Shir Malas, Ayinu Kachomim, we're like dreamers. That wasn't a bad thing, because the dreaming, your contradictions in life doesn't stop you from trying to be productive, at least to the ability that you can. However, when you're sleeping, it's not logical. Therefore, when a person dreams, you're just having imaginary ideas. It doesn't have to make sense. When a person wakes up, it's the thought goes into the brain. Just the wording is that the brain is always there. The brain is always logical. It's not like you lose logic. Your thinking doesn't enter your logic. So the part of you that should tackle the issue in a logical way is when a person's sleeping. So the machshava leaves the brain, and therefore there's no guarantee that what you're going to dream about or thinking about in your sleep is going to be logical. But when you wake up, your brain goes back, your thinking goes back into the brain. Top page 10. And goes back, the thinking goes back into your brain. And then you think things that you want to think, or at least that makes sense to think. So first of all, there's many ideas. One idea is that may not be logical, and also you have no choice. You can't control what you're thinking about because your mind is wandering. And again, over here he's talking about it in a way there's obviously that we want to be in control and we want to have logic. In the idea of Ayinu Kachalmim, in the Haftorah, in the Mammar we learned in Vayeshev, it talks about it how that's how a person can get by, so to say, be productive in times of contradiction, in times of galus. So he says like this. So too when it comes to this love. When a person's love is asleep, so just like this, so the machshav is not in your moyach. So therefore, your approach to your love for Hashem doesn't necessarily have to always make sense. So even though you remember Hashem in your heart, it means we're not talking about a person who's sleeping physically. You're sleeping emotionally. You're sleeping spiritually. You know that God fills the world. There's God. It's not a contradiction for you to do something that's contrary to what Hashem wants you to do. It's not like you remember Hashem and then later you can do something. As you're remembering Hashem, in that memory itself, you're not doing what you should be doing. And the famous example is Mamaer, as the rabbis have taught us, ganava, when a person is possibly about to rob, he's about to enter into the basement, right? you know God exists. Why? Because you're asking God that you should be successful in this robbery that you're doing. So even though God doesn't want you to steal, but nevertheless, it's not a contradiction to praying to God. So that's the idea of sleeping. That's not logical. So why? The fact that you know God is alive is like an imaginary state. And it's beyond the logic. And therefore logic would say it doesn't make sense. But the person's in a state of slumber, so it doesn't have to make sense. And therefore, your thinking doesn't enter the brain, and you're thinking ideas that that in other times that wouldn't make sense to you. So what do you have to do? So if you want to have a proper love for Hashem, it means you have to wake up. You have to wake this love up from its slumber. And enter the love into your thinking process, into your brain. Like we said before in the beginning of the Mammar, there's different ways of avodah. And one of the avodah is the tefillah. And tefillah, idea of tefillah to pray is not just to say, it's not just to ask for things that you want. The idea of praying davening is to recognize and awaken the love. And so when you're awakening the love, you have to do hisbonenus, you have to do contemplation about the things that would bring love. And these are logical things. It's not like you know God exists without thinking about it. Because that could be that's not a contradiction. Then you could be slumbering, you could be sleeping. That's like a person who has dreams. But if you want to really have the love in a conscious way, you have to do hisbonenus. You have to think about it in a way that the rabbis have established the tefillah. And that is the process of building up until we reach the Shema Yisrael, which is V'haftas Hashem Elokech. We love Hashem our Lord. And what is the idea? What are we trying to reach? What are we trying to understand with this hisbonenus? Again, hisbonenus is not information. We all have information. We all have information. That's not what hisbonenus is. Because if you're just to know about that something exists, not going to affect anyone. The idea is, and the proof is that we daven every day. If we just needed information, so why are we davening every day? Yesterday we already discussed that God exists. Why do we have to discuss it again today? Because davening is not about information. It's about being real and alive with that information. So therefore, what's the hisbonenus? That God is the God and the world is one. And not that God is the God of the world, that there's a world. And God rules the world. But the world almost has its own life, like Oris and Kalim. Oris and Kalim, in theory, in the system of lights and vessels, the lights that light up the vessels are not the same lights that create the vessels or keep the vessels in existence. That's another life force. But from Hashem, it's Hakol Echad. Everything's one. It's all different manifestations, but it's all one. The lights, the force, the light that creates the vessels, it's all one. And therefore, it's Kel Olam. God is the God of God, and the world is one, not God of the world. And I think we discussed this question before, and I saw Rabbi Steinsaltz, Rabbi Evan Yisrael discusses this question in one of his shiurim in Lekutai Torah or Torah, I forget, where one of the bases that we learn over and over again is, which we're going to get to in a second, is Ani Avai Lo Nisi, that God doesn't change. That when a person recognizes Ani Avai Lo Nisi, God there's no change in God. So that's supposed to trigger Ava love. So the question is why? Why would that trigger love? So again, it's like information. So God doesn't change, but why does that make me love God? Because God doesn't change. So that's the difference between Kel Olam, Kel Ha'ilam. If everything is about you, so then when you have information that doesn't apply to you, it doesn't change your life. So what? So God doesn't change. What's that have to do with me? But when you recognize God is the world, that there is nothing else outside of God, and God doesn't change, and the violation is see. Then there's no change in God. Whatever God wanted from you yesterday, He wants from you today. The world is not its own existence. It's a manifestation from God. Just like the light of the sun that comes out. When God wanted to create the world, He created the world and it stayed in existence. Like the Rambam is Prata Tanya, is the world is constantly being recreated by Hashem. There's no existence of the world on its own. For example, he says that, now he's going to go into example that, again, these are ideas of the hisbonenus that's supposed to bring the person to love, not information, because information is not going to help a person, but you have to actually contemplate it to the fact that the information is supposed to lead to love. It means the part that's expected from the person is to take that information and contemplate it to the fact that it's going to create an emotional reaction. like anything else. Like if you really, really recognize that something is good for you or important to you, or if your dependence exists on it, at least you would create yesh mishayev, someone who loves. Someone who loves means is that my existence is dependent on that. That's a lower level of love, but at least it's connecting your existence to God. For example, when it comes to things of vegetation, anything that comes in this world has a koyach ruchni, has a spiritual life force of growth that gives that manifests eventually, comes into something of growth. And the power for growth comes from there. Goes the grass comes out, bilones, or the trees or pears or fruits. So certainly the Alter Rebbe says, hapriya nitzmach, the actual fruit, the orange, the apple that grows out of the ground. Shu gashmius, that's the actual something physical, tangible. You can't say that whatever's in the ground that creates the growth, it's really, there's an orange there, right? There's no oranges in the ground. There's a power that from the ground comes out that there should grow an orange. It's just a ray of the power of growth. That comes from the spiritual ability for something to grow. For arazu, and eventually this spiritual life that is going to create, that is the source of the fruits or whatever it is that's growing, is eventually becomes so transformed into a gashmis, into a physical being, until it actually becomes a fruit. That's not just the visual. It has taste. Negoshim lechayich, could be bitter, sweet, whatever. Metiko is sweet. That's not really in the spiritual part of it. It's only in the physical part. And the question is how deep. Where does that go? I think this Gemara says. The Gemara talks about the people that where was it in Sichon? Rashi quotes actually in Bamidbar somewhere, that they were able to taste the dirt and know what they could plant. That from the dirt they were able to identify the koach hatzameach in the dirt, what would be good to grow. But he says, here we go, he introduces the idea, the difference, what we know in Chassidus and Kabbalah, between Or and Shefa. Or is a manifestation of light, like the sun gives off light, and Shefa is a flow. So he says it's not like a flow, which would be the case of water that goes from a high place to a low place. What does it mean it's not like a flow? By definition, a flow, when water is in a high place and goes to a low place, whatever amount of water is now in the low place is no longer in the high place. When the water goes down, it's no longer in its original place at all. Whatever the amount is, doesn't mean the full amount doesn't go. Then if 16 ounces goes, then it's 16 ounces less. That's all shefa. But he's saying shefa, the power to grow is not a shefa. It's not a flow where there's something that's lacking now in the earth because something grew. So the fact that there's an orange now, there's no more the koach hatzameach, the power for vegetation to grow in the earth is no longer there for that orange that grew. We don't say that. It's so it's just because the fruit grew doesn't mean that there's less now. There's less power of vegetation in the earth. And it can continue to grow many times. Although when we talk about Shemitah, one of the things the ideas of Shemitah is that the ground the earth should rest. And we know that it comes to the laws of Omer. The Gemara, the Mishnah tells us that they would different each year they would do half a field, so the wheat should be better. So there is some sort of obviously something that happens when there's growth. But it's not like the ground could always give growth. It's not like something physically is missing, like water would go from point A to point B. Therefore, the wise people of truth, meaning to say that Kabbalistic teachers, that when we talk about something that gives life to something, but it's not lacking anything, that's a ray, that's a ha'ara, as opposed to shefa, which is flow. He gives an example of a person. I don't think the idea of Shemitah or of the Omer means that there's lacking, but you could get tired. Tired and lacking is not the same thing. It means because he gives an example now of thinking. A person also sometimes needs to stop thinking. You think too long, you get tired. But it doesn't mean you cannot think anymore if you wanted to. When a person's thinking, the thinking comes from a person's soul, the ability to think of any idea that it is that you're thinking about. You can't say that every thought, that now my soul is lacking something because I thought something now. Your soul can reproduce thoughts constantly, and it does. A person is not lacking or changed because you just thought something. Other things, yes. Other things that you lose fluids or you lose things, it's no longer there, right? If you take blood, you can't take blood every day because you have to produce more blood. A person could think constantly. So too, these are all the parts of his beinunus that is meant to lead to a person to ava, to love. So too, God is not lacking anything. Any violation is God doesn't change. Nothing matters means it's not chashuv that because you've thought about something now, or because the world was created now, or because something happened in creation, therefore something's changed by God. Nothing matters to God. God has no change at all. Like it says, any violation God doesn't change. We say in davening, God is the same God before and after. And that is supposed to trigger love. Again, aniya violation is supposed to translate to love. And why? So it means it's not enough to know the information. Because a lot of people say aniya violation so what? What's that have to do with me? But aniya violation is because it does affect you. You're in this world. I mean, you have to put all the pieces together. And by understanding that there's no change in God, there's no compromise in God, there's no change in God. The situation doesn't change God. So therefore, what Hashem wants hasn't changed, and kihu chayecha, because He's your life. These are all things that again. It's not the where you stop in this is boinunus. It depends about how much you matter. It means this, if it's about your furthering your self-interest, even on the most high spiritual level, that now you have purpose and now you have a reason. So that's the yesh mishayiv, someone who loves. It means at the end of the day is you're benefiting. It means that the love is because that's something in it for you. Eventually, the tzaddikim reach the level. It's not about me. It's about when you realize I need a violation easy. So I don't want to exist. I don't want my existence to be something separate from God, because nothing should be separate from God. But that's a higher level of love. This is what we say. What do you mean that we're calling to God's name? That we're recognizing that God is God, that God in the world is one. He's not God of the world. The Alter Rebbe says this is the whole davening. The whole davening runs around this idea. And why? You have to say it over and over again. Like I said, davening yesterday has nothing to do with today because you went to sleep. It says v'yashkem avram aboki. He has to wake up in the morning. It means that whatever went to sleep has to wake up again. Just because you awoken it once doesn't mean you're going to wake it up a second time. And that's why the people that were able to stay plugged in constantly didn't daven. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai didn't daven really. There's other Tanoim that didn't daven. Why? Because they didn't need to daven. They're always alive. You have to say it over and over and over again until you mamish wedge it into your heart. That it becomes actual visual to you. This is a reality. What's it mean, Riyah Mamish? This is Mamish your reality. Each person has to got length in this. Each person to your ability. Some people that have you've created your mind to be more megushim, more physical. And therefore, these ideas which are refined ideas of godliness and spirituality, don't penetrate you. And therefore, you have to break through that geshem, through that gashmis that you've created around your heart and mind, that these are things that should matter to you. Said the Pesukei de Zimra. So why, if the whole idea of davening is information of his boinunus, of the oneness of Hashem, Aniyah Vayla, which boils down to Aniyah Vayla, Shanisi, God doesn't change, and therefore you should have, like the pasuk continues, that Bnei Yisrael lechelisem. Why don't you have klei nefesh? Why don't you lose yourself by knowing God doesn't change? So why do we have tefillos? Why do we have different prayers within the davening itself, within the not the Amida, but within the Pesukei de Zimra? So Cautious Ram says Pesukei de Zimra, and the fact that we ask things from God, with shvachim and things that we praise God, that the Anshe Knesset Gedola instituted and put into the davening. Why? Because So we look at it from our perspective that God should appreciate the fact that we're davening, and He does appreciate the fact that we're davening, and that we're trying to apply ourselves, and He does appreciate that we're trying to apply ourselves and build love. But from the perspective of the angels, from the outside world, they look at this person and say, "Who's this person to try to have love? You know what it is to love Hashem? And you and this person, we know what this person's been doing. So why should this person have? Who does this person have? What right does this person have to love Hashem?" This is machem sheish kitregim aladim. This kitregim. Kitregim means there's voices that are negative voices that argue with God and say, don't open this person's mind, don't open this person's heart. And they judge the person. Is this person worthy to have love of Hashem? And there's other obstacles, not just the voices. That weigh on the person. There's anxieties of life. That prevent the person from properly concentrating because of the issues in life. And therefore we ask Hashem, Rachim, He should have compassion on us. Let me daven. Take away all my anxieties. Give me 5, give me 10 minutes, give me a half hour to daven. The prayers that we say, you're compassionate. But the point is that we're trying to make a path that we should be able to have the ability, and there shouldn't be the obstacles, whether from within or from out, that should prevent us of trying at least to open up our hearts and our mind to have love for Hashem. When we finally reach the Kriya Shema, it says, Hashem is one. And the Gemara says, we've mentioned this many times, the people that lived in Jericho, they were right away when they said Shema, they said love. As soon as they got to that they were able to proclaim Shema Yisrael, listen Israel, means pay attention. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our Lord is one, and then the whole world is all one with Hashem. Right away they felt the love. They didn't have to translate it. So it says they didn't have to go b'davar acher. They didn't have to say anything else, which means they didn't have to say what we all say, the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Vod. As soon as they said Shema Yisrael, they felt the love. Because the level that the people who lived in Jericho were able to contemplate when it came to saying Shema Yisrael, they were able to build up that when they said Shema Yisrael, right away they felt the love. Therefore, they right away said Shema after they said V'hafta right after they said Shema. But that's not the law, because not all of us are holding that level that we could say that as soon as we say Shema Yisrael, we feel the love. Because we do say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam. It's not a separation. It's like a translation. What we're trying to say is, what do we say? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Then we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus. We're mentioning God's kingship. Why? Because we have to connect God's being king over us. We have to recognize the shlita, the rule over us, which is what's called Yichud Tata. Shema Yisrael is saying God is one. Is more of an abstract idea. Shema, which is from God's perspective, the world doesn't exist. From our perspective, we say the world exists, but God's the king of the world. So he says, no, it's not why. When you say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam, void forever, and echad and one is all one thing, which is an idea by Chalufei Asfon. It's changing the letters and the words in a Kabbalistic way, that the message of void forever and echad and one is the same idea. And this Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus is the idea of the lower level of unification, which is that there's a world, but the world is that God is running the world. Even though we just said before, the idea a person is supposed to reach kel olam, not kel olam, but even in Yichud Tata means from our perspective, we could try to understand that whatever we think the world is separate, it's not really separate. But from God's perspective, it doesn't even see the world as an entity. Okay. Now he says so. That's the idea of davening. Davening is a person should love Hashem, and it's something that you have to apply yourself, and it's something you have to hope there's not a lot of voices out there, inside or outside, that are preventing it. So a person should be able to reach the love. He says there's two types of love. There's the automatic love. As soon as the person thinks about Hashem, and all of a sudden it's like a flame that just lights up. And it's like a fire that goes with no agenda, no mavukish. Mavukish means it's not looking to get anything. There's nothing in it for itself. It recognizes God, and it wants to be part of that. Not because there's no mavukish. There's no why do you love God? What is in it for you? I don't have to have a reason why. There's not any violation. He said, there's nothing else to love in the world. Nothing else exists in the world. And like he says in Perek Aleph, in the first section of Tanya, Perek Yud, it's not even to cleave to God. Or even to quench a thirst. I'm thirsty for spirituality, for godliness, so therefore I want to cleave to God. It's nothing. I just don't exist. My whole, this is a very high level. What's a chassid? Turning to page 11. It's all about being connected to your Creator. Because that's one love. He doesn't elaborate on that because that's the love of tzaddikim. That has no mavukish, there's no agenda why they love Hashem. The second love is it's a love that you want to connect to God. Right? After you're thinking all these things that we talked about, so you don't want to connect to anything else. It means what drives you in life is nothing else. It's only to be connected to Hashem. And this any person could achieve the idea of this love, of loving Hashem, even if it's about something that you have to gain out of it. And the idea is that you want to reach the level that God is your Lord. And he says in the parentheses, the first love is the level of Bnei Aliyah, which we said before is like the great tzaddikim. And that's why it says, and therefore he answers the question, Simchut Tzaddikim. We asked originally, the question was, how could we expect every person to have simcha, to have joy? It says that Simchut Tzaddikim Hashem. So that's the joy of the Ava, the love that is connected to, that's not about you, it's just about God. But on a lower level, every person could achieve that. And he says, V'zehu Kabbalah's Malchus Shemayim B'Krishma, Rakshiyevsha Dafka B'Yisparach Chilas Machshav Tvisaveh. So, but the thing is like this. So this is what happens on Shema. A person accepts God as your king, and you want to be connected. The problem is, what are you holding on to? There's nothing. You can't grasp God. You want to love God, but you have to hold on to something. Actually, you want to connect, but you can't. God is way beyond our reach. And he's hidden and he's concealed and hidden. Pirish, what does it mean? Even the hidden worlds. And these hidden worlds are even higher than the world to come. God is not even revealed there. It means that even the most spiritual space, oilam is a space, is makom, right? So the most spiritual space, it's even higher than the world to come, right? We're all talking about the world to come, so we're talking about higher than the world to come, and that's just and the essence of God is beyond that and beyond that space. They don't grasp the essence of God. And he's hidden of all hiddenness. So how could a person grasp Hashem? So the only way is that Hashem gave us the way. That's why we say in the Shema Yisrael, there's one way you could attach to Hashem. Hashem, like the fruit, Hashem put himself, the whole essence of God, into Torah mitzvahs. And when you learn Torah mitzvahs, that's the way you grasp Hashem. That's why it says they speak the words of Torah. Because in the words of Torah is a ray of the manifestation of the essence of God. Like he said before, just like the thought and the growth come from the essence, and there's no lacking of it. See, it's not just when he said before in the Mammar that the difference between a ray of something or a flow of something is that when the flow is in point A, it's no longer in point B. It's not just to describe the change that happens in the giving, right? So when you give something and it's in your pocket, you give someone something and it's no longer in your pocket, it's in the other person's pocket. So then it's no longer by you, it's by the next person. It's very nice, you did a gesture, you gave someone, but it's no longer with you. So what happens when that in that case? Now halachically, right, it belongs to you. So what you'll do is you'll remember that why do you have it? Because there was a kind person who gave it to you. But once the person gave it to you, it's yours now. And you could be thankful and you could make a schus and you could do everything, but now it became yours. When it's a ray, it never left. So therefore, the connection between you and the giving side is more alive when it comes through flow, because while the light is shining, it's still connected to the source of light. And if you're able to touch now the ray of light, you're actually touching the source. And therefore, Torah, that's what Torah is. Torah, he says, it's like the Koch Tzameach. When you're learning Torah, God is still in the Torah. It's not like he put himself in the Torah and he left, like a flow. He's still in the Torah as you're learning it. So when you're learning the Torah, you're actually connecting to the essence of God. Like it says by the man, it came from a light, but it was able to come physical until they actually took the man, the food that came down in the desert. They grinded it, they made it into a cake, whatever it is they ate. That's what it says, there's light of Torah. It's a manifestation of God's light and still connected. And so then when you start learning Torah, you're not learning an idea that left God. That idea is, what does it mean still with God? It's not something he once thought about. He's thinking about it as you're thinking about it. So to say, lahavdil. So your mamish connected. It's not just you know what he knows. You're knowing what he's knowing now. He says there's two. Oh, sorry. He says so then, if that's the case, if that's what a person mamish v'debartabam, so where is the see? There's two things. We talked about the simcha and we talked about the ava. Traditionally, ava and simcha don't. When a person has simcha, the person doesn't have ava. A person's happy about a situation. Love comes from a distance. He says that in the other Mammar of this week, it talks about there's three levels of love. There's the love that you're not there, that you're far. Then there's the love that you're there, but you can't see. Right? You're in the house. You're in your father's house, but your father's hiding from you in his house. Imagine the tension then. You know you're there. Your father's somewhere in the house, but you can't see your father. So the love is mamish building up. But that's the example of the Seres Mei Tshuva, the 10 days of Tshuva. Karo b'yosi you call to God while he's close. He's there, but you can't see him. So therefore, the love is mamish exploding. But when you see him, it's not the love. Then it's the simcha. So here he says, we were talking about the simcha. So he says, the love comes from the contemplation of davening. But then, when a person recognizes that after you feel the love, you're learning Torah, you're connected to the light, simcha gedola, basic Torah mitzvahs, then all of a sudden you realize the tremendous joy you have, that you have an opportunity to connect to Hashem. Now you satisfied your thirst. The thirst was the building up of the love. Now, how do you connect to Hashem? Through learning Torah. And therefore, when it talks about the curses, it says, why didn't you connect to that simcha? Why didn't you appreciate what Hashem's, the opportunities God is giving for you? And therefore, when you did work, you did avodah, you didn't recognize the simcha, you didn't recognize the opportunity you have to connect to Hashem. Every person, if you just pay attention a little bit, that I'm able to, when I learn Torah, every person who learns Torah, every person has a connection to Torah. When I learn Torah, Pasha connecting simultaneously with the Eibishter, it's not even a shefa, it's a light that's still connected to the source. Why don't you have simcha? So you say, I'm not a tzaddik. You don't have to be a tzaddik to recognize, to take joy in being connected to Hashem. He says, but then when it comes to learning the Torah, he says, there's two levels of learning Torah. And we're going to go a little further, I'm going to skip to them. So there's two levels of learning Torah. There's one learning of the Torah immediately after davening. When a person awakens the love. A person who learns like a person who's thirsty for water. Then a person's mamish b'simcha because you were thirsty and you have simcha for Hashem. What's the second level of learning? When a person falls out of that space, you're not plugged in, you're not davening, you're not in the shul. Whether you're at work, when you're in the middle of business, even if your person is learning, sitting in the learning, but you're not in the place, you're not connected to the davening. So he says that a person basically says like this. There's when you feel the love, you mamish, you daven, you said v'hafta, and you connected to the love, you mamish, feel plugged in right away. And then there's throughout the day, you daven before. You don't remember every time you open up the Gemara Every time you stop to have a shir by mincha, that you feel the love. It kind of wore off. Like I said, every day you have to do it again, so it doesn't last forever. But nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact by learning Torah you're connected to Hashem. And he continues, even though throughout the day you start distancing yourself from God. And he says, an absolute distance. Because you get preoccupied. And it's very, very hard to stay focused on aniyah violation nisi, that God hasn't changed when you're trying to close a business deal. Right? It talks about Binyamin Kletzker. Binyamin Kletzker, we know the story. Binyamin Kletzker, when he did the math of how much wood he chopped, his business did, he said, there's no one else but God. But that's Madrega. But since you didn't do anything wrong, you did it beheter. So therefore, you could take that space and that time and elevate it, because it didn't get trapped. That your free time hasn't been trapped in negative yet. Therefore, it's called permissible, like something that's released. It gives an example. If you have a person who's been taken captive by his enemy or her enemy, but no one locked the door. The person says you have to be here. No one's forcing you. You can leave whenever you want. The only time you get locked in is when you do something asr. Asr means you become trapped. Then you become trapped in the negative forces. But a person who's just been preoccupied throughout the day, not thinking about God, so although you're kind of disconnected, but you could always reconnect because you did nothing that totally separates you. Let's say you did do a dvar isr. It says, then you have to do tshuva. But there's always ways to reconnect again. And he said like this. Actually, this is the bitter pill. And Chassidus explains that there's a difference between atzvus, depression, and Meriter's bitterness. Bitterness is a way of serving God. That it's not only a way of serving God that even though you're bitter, but actually is a fuel to serve God. Because even though when you're bitter, when you recognize that notwithstanding the fact that there's a lot of things to be bitter about, Hashem is still available. I'm able to learn. That gives you tremendous simcha. It says, the more a person recognizes that he or she is distant from God throughout the day, a person knows who they are. I'm not a person who's always thinking about God. I'm not always in love with God. Even if I'm learning. A person, not every time you're learning, learning things. You can start talking Devorim b'Teilim. Especially if you've done things in your youth, the sins of the youth. Like the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe says, everyone knows what they struggle with. Even though you've done tshuva. If you haven't done the proper tshuva, which is sigufim hamemarkin, whether it's done through different pains that clean a person. The more a person realizes how small they are, and you're kind of disgusted with certain things that you've preoccupied yourself with. And you put yourself secondary. Again, not in the way of depression. This is being just honest. No one's perfect. And you recognize that you've done things in your past and you haven't totally rectified them. And you're not the most holy person. And why was I created? But nevertheless, I could learn Torah. No matter notwithstanding, no matter what happens, I could learn Torah. And what does it mean to learn Torah? I'm connected to Hashem. That's the way, v'dibartem, of how I actualize my love. So how excited would you be, knowing that you look the way you look, you smell the way you smell, nevertheless Hashem wants to sit with you and learn. And which means it's a sign of your connection. And he says, what is the difference between Meriris and Atzvus? And he says it now right here. But Atzvus, what does it mean to be depressed? Which is a weight. Is when you're not honest with yourself. When depression doesn't come from the fact that you're far from God. Depression comes from it's about you. Why am I not a great person? Not recognizing that I have faults, but you look at your faults as a reflection of who you are. I want to be a great person. Like why am I not as great? Why am I any different than Rashbi? There's a person who learned the whole day Torah. That was his occupation. With one thing, he could lift all kitrogim of the world. He was totally connected to one. He was one with God. Pirish meaning, what does it mean? Shaloi 12. He never slept, like I said before. Because Rashbi never slept, he never had to wake up the Abba. You only have to wake up the love if you're sleeping. And therefore he was parted from tefillah. So what is the difference? The difference, he says, between a person who's bitter and a person who's depressed is bitterness is recognizing your distance, and therefore any connection you're excited. But a person who's depressed is not excited about a connection because you're more bothered by why am I not considered a great person. So it's all about your ego and your self-worth. So if you think I should be a great person, so you're depressed, why am I not a great person? When you say no, so I did sin. Hopefully I'm going to try to rectify it, but I still connect. You're excited. So the bitterness actually fuels you to become better. It doesn't sit as a weight on you. And therefore he goes back. I'm going to say a little bit further. He goes and he continues and he says that this is the idea of Yaakov, and then he goes into the level of Yisrael. But Yisrael is Li Roish, and that has the love. And he's saying that he talks about I'm going to say a little bit outside. I'm going to go to the end. He talks about the love, that there's the difference between the love of Yosef and the love of Binyamin. That's when we talk about everything in the Torah, we think it's just casual. It says that Yosef hid the goblet, the silver goblet in Binyamin. Yosef has the love. The silver is kesef, is an expression of nichsafti, of love. And Yosef wanted that Binyamin, who's considered tzaddik katan, a smaller person, should also have the love. Means there's Yaakov and Yisrael. There's different names. There's different times when our neshama, different parts of our neshama are shining. And the more spiritual this part of us that's shining, the more we could kind of distance ourselves from the distractions of life and have a more pure feeling of love. But the idea is that everyone could love, and especially everyone could connect. And the bottom line is everyone has to have simcha. Because simcha comes from of the things we can do, not about the things we cannot do. And when a person recognizes there's so much we can do, so then you have simcha, and that's why God says Moshe says in this week's parsha, Tachas Hashem b'simcha. Why wouldn't you be in simcha? And whatever the reason you weren't b'simcha, if you weren't b'simcha because you were depressed, why were you depressed? Why do you expect so much from yourself? Everyone has problems, but you're able to love, and you're able to learn, you're able to connect. So basically, what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, there's never an excuse not to be happy. You have to be happy for the things that you can do, the opportunities you can do, and at any time, you could shut off and open up a sefer. At any time, you could shut off and say Tillim. Anytime you could daven, you could do a mitzvah, and therefore you should have simcha. It says everything that the Arizal accomplished, he said he accomplished through simcha shalom mitzvah. So then he says, but we're going to skip to the bottom of page 12 on the left-hand side. He says, but in order to open yourself to the gift, so to say, that Yosef gives to Binyamin, the silver goblet, there has to be a little preparation. You can't just run into davening. So we've learned this before, but this is what's called tachlis. This is bottom line things. A person has to have proper mindset. You have to feel the bitterness of why isn't the higher level of me, my Yisrael, why isn't that being revealed? It means what you have, again, the bitterness is also because things that you've created in yourself that are not right, the things that you've done wrong. But it's not, but that doesn't, there's not the follow-up, which therefore I'm depressed. The bitterness is you're bitter for what's happening, but it's not therefore I'm depressed because I expected more for myself. He says, why am I not respected by others? As a tzaddik, what did I do that I didn't become a tzaddik? But it's just you're bitter from the true facts of your life. Because you have sins and you're bitter. I'm bitter for the sin, not for the effect of the sin. It brings a person to being humble. When a person has an honest understanding of where they are. It says the person top page, it doesn't have to be in the heart. It means a person sometimes wonders, why am I not bitter in my heart? You don't have to just be bitter in your heart. If you can't feel the bitterness in your heart, at least know that you have what to be bitter about. So that's, and his point is, it's not like the world thinks that a person could just go with a thick heart, a closed heart, into davening. You can't just walk in to morning and start davening without kind of cracking the shell a bit. It says that the day comes, the sun rises, and the sickness goes away a bit. So you have to that Avram wakes up in the morning with the chesed. You have to prepare yourself for that. So there's three things he says. Okay, so you have bitterness of the situation. Again, just bitter because you have the opportunity to connect, but you have to start loving first. So how do you go into shul loving? You can't just run in and say, okay, I'm here. You have to prepare yourself. And what's the things he says over here? What are the three things that you have to do to prepare yourself? One is the mikveh. Number one is a person has to go to the mikveh before davening, or should try to go to the mikveh sometimes before davening. Mishnah, ma mikveh matar, that a mikveh makes a person pure. That's the first step to making yourself open to davening. In a Rif, he goes to Rif, Rabbeinu Alphys, which is the Rif blew the shofar on Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah in his Bezdin. Perkimul Brachas, it brings down in the beginning, in the third chapter, Brachas, the Talmidei the Rabbi and the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina, and the students of Rabbeinu Yoina say in the name of Reb Hai Goin, the fact that a person has a seminal discharge doesn't have to go to the mikveh, that's only for learning. According to the Rif and the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, a person who has a seminal discharge before davening has to go to the mikveh. Even though the halach is not like the Rif and the students of Rabbeinu Yonah. As is brought down. The students say, even if you don't agree that it's halachically, but everyone has to agree that your davening is accepted better when you go to the mikveh. So you can't say the mikveh doesn't mean anything. Just because the halacha is not like the Rif and Rabbeinu Yoina doesn't mean the mikveh doesn't mean anything. It just means that it's not conditional, but it definitely makes your tefillah better. Why taka? Does even according to Rabbeinu Yoina, the students of Rabbeinu Yoina and the Rif, that the Torah you don't have to go to the mikveh, but for davening you do. The Gemara says in Sota, that the when a person is pure, it gives you a reach, a smell of purity. Like it says in the Gemara, that the person smelled the smell of the figs. If you smell something, sensitive to smell is a sign of purity. Interesting. A person who has a sensitivity to smell in a positive way is a sign that you have purity. So we see that smell, sensitive especially to spiritual smell, right? Yaakov walked in. Yaakov walked in to Yitzchak. He says, I smell the smell of Gan Eden. So the idea of smell is the idea of tahara. Because we know someone who's pure is impure, it's an encompassing energy. Therefore, it's connected to smell, because the purity is a smell, gives off a pure smell. And that's why he says the karbanos are called reach nichayach. When a person sacrifices in the times of the temple, it gave off a smell for Hashem. God smelled the smell of Noach's sacrifice. And that's why the punishment for Titus, who destroyed the temple, who stopped the karbanos, his punishment was that he got a mosquito up in his nostrils. Because God punished him. Because he destroyed the temple, and nullified the sacrifices, which were which gave God pleasure in the way of smell. So therefore he was punished by through the nostrils. And it says, my tefillah is through like the nostrils. And he says tefillah and prayer, he says, is in the place of karbanos. And therefore, the reach nichayach, it says when a person davens, I'm davening to the nostril. Therefore, specifically davening, which is in the place of karbanos, a person has to have purity, and therefore a person has to go to the mikveh. Gives a good smell. Therefore, best as a person should go to the mikveh before davening, even though Allah is not like the Rif and the students of Rabbeinu Yoina. Second thing is base tzedakah. A person must give tzedakah before he daven. It says, Rabbi Lezer Yoav Pruta gave tzedakah to an ani before davening, quoting the pasuk, tzedek through tzedek, through justice, through tzedakah, I come to see you, I come to davening. Why do you have to give tzedakah before you daven? Because again, there's voices out there who say, who is this person to enter the chamber of God and daven? Tzedakah saves a person from death. Tzedakah elevates a person. So tzedakah is definitely a good thing to do before you daven. And the third thing is asik v'limud Torah Musar. A person should learn, this is the idea why we learn chassidus before we daven. Because you should learn the divrei musar, divrei musar nimtzam b'zohar, to learn ideas of Kabbalah and chassidus. Milashon ha'ara, which zohar means to give off light. B'makom ha'chayshich, in the darkness of the person. Shu chachmas emes, which is the true wisdom. And he finishes off that Eishes Chayil Teres Baila, that at the end of the day is, and he goes back to the beginning, that every person could reach Simcha. And therefore, and this is the simple belief of that God is in the world, even if you don't have the proper contemplation. Even if a person's not the most best person, doesn't have the most isbaininess, you have to know how precious you are at the end of the day. And the person, because God's dira is in this world. He wants holiness in this world. And anything that is bringing godliness in this world is the kavanah, is what Hashem wants. But here at Teres Baal, so much so it's a crowning of the husband. Because the Baal is the Avara B'Shachris B'Nis B'Munah Pshuta. Because the great love is only after the person has simple belief in God. The Dafka Bay B'Hashem Echad, to cleave to Hashem. Seiv Kolam Sha'avra B'Zuhu B'Chnis T'char. The love is masculine, like it's a Zercha Chazdei. But at the end of the day is the simple love, that a simple love and the simple connection and the simple belief a Yid has is even crowning of that love. Why? Because in Sava Kadosh Baruch Hu, God's not looking for madregas. He's not looking for levels. He's looking for simple connection a Yid has. As long as he's doing a dir, he's making a resting place in his or her space in this world. Yamunah Pshut is a simple belief. Nasa Teres L'Reishay becomes the crown of the head. Right, we skipped a good part of it, but I wanted to be able to complete at least which we did, Baruch Hashem. And thank you all for joining, those here and those on Zoom.
Thank you.
Ayla Tov, take care.
You too.